And we're live. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi, all. Welcome to Generational Change. I'm Jen.
I'm Peter.
See, it's got to be the intro.
Yeah,
that way people will know.
And this is
Lulu.
Hey, Lou. Say hi. Smile. Come on, Lou. Smile.
She's so cute. So I just got a text from our scheduled guest this evening that they just introduced a bill. It's the voter suppression bill that they're introducing in the Florida House right now, and this is what we're dealing with. So I'm not sure if he's going to be able to come on. I'm waiting to find out.
Yeah, Omari is literally just got called back into session. So we'll see what ultimately ends up happening. We'll hope for the best. This is one of those things that can drag on for hours, as we know, or it could be relatively quick. It really just depends. This was something, this is the voter suppression bill, not a surprise. Basically, Florida's trying to mirror exactly what happened in Georgia, where they basically want to make life infinitely more difficult for the voting public. Not a surprise. But they want to add a whole bunch of caveats to what is now Senate Bill 90. And it looks like it's going to be potentially a party line vote, but we'll see what happens there. Adding new identification and signature requirements for voting by mail. Again, you have simple identification. I don't know why you need to add anything additional to that.
These are just all added hoops, and there's absolutely nothing here but just making life more difficult for people. Expanding the perimeter around the voting location to 150 feet. Now, I actually don't mind that, because essentially what that does is it shuts down campaigning at the polling locations. And I am not opposed to that, to be honest with you.
Well, if anybody is familiar with what typically goes on during campaign season and has been to certain places, not every district is bad. There's certain locations that are much more what I would call efficiently handled. And then there are ones that are just completely disastrous. I think you have to have a right to make your case as a candidate.
I do too. I just don't think it has to be the day someone's going in to vote. And honestly, if you do your job properly up until that point, that really shouldn't be the issue. And I also think as a voter, before I was doing mail-ins and when I would go to vote, I would walk so far around the perimeter to avoid all those people harassing and giving me and I don't care how far out the perimeter it is. If you have to walk through it, it's annoying. It is. It's annoying. The signs are ridiculous. It's so environmentally improper. It's so wasteful. And it's grotesque. So quite honestly, that is one thing I'm not opposed to.
Yeah, I think that we really have to become realistic about what is fair campaigning and what isn't. If you've ever seen what it's like to be hounded at a polling site.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. The thing about the 150-foot requirement is that is more about the rights of candidates. I'm not as concerned about that. I'm concerned about voter suppression, and suppression is things that you do to limit access of voters to a polling place. So limiting a candidate's reach in a particular location, to me, is not voter suppressing. That to me is not a suppressive thing.
I think that what you also have to remember is, and this is very important, people, like I said, should be able to make their case, but there's always some that is going to ruin it for everybody else. And if you've ever been involved at a local polling station, as it is in a lot of places, it could become very hostile. And that's one of the reasons why they don't want this. They don't want them harassing potential voters. They don't want these tiffs that go on back and forth between one faction of one campaign, one faction of another campaign.
It's just frustrating. I mean, honestly, it's harassment. And actually, the idea of all the people hovering, and we did it, and I hated every second of having to hover at people at polling locations like vultures on a carcass. And it's so so to me, that actually is suppressive, because as a voter, I would avoid that. So to me, when we're going to talk about backing off in their face, that's less suppressive. So.
No, it is definitely.
But everything else in that bill looks ridiculous.
Well, that's the whole point, because it's ultimately what becomes known as poison pills. So they stick little pills, poison pills, if you will, in these bills. And then all that anybody ever talks about is what favors their side. If something is in a bill that is looking good for their side, they're going to talk that up and ignore all the garbage that comes with it. And the same will be true on the other side.
Yeah.
So while there may be merits to things that are in every one of these bills, there's always going to be caveats amendments that are thrown into these bills that should kill the bill. And again, it's done for one of two reasons. One, it's done to obviously for the benefit of corporate special interests, or two, it's done for the purpose of never getting anything done. It's just to continue this cycle of, well, the bill sucks now and now nobody's interested. Well,
it's sort of like the controlled opposition, good cop, bad cop. There's no intention of getting anything done, but this way it at least looks like there was some sort of like political struggle. There was some effort done, there, which... So anyway, that is where our guest could get held up. So what we could do is we could go into...
We've got plenty of stuff to talk about this evening. Yes. Obviously, we're hoping Omari does not get held up too long.
And if he does, we're just going to have to wing it. Maybe I can find someone else to just come on, someone really exciting.
Well, hey,
I don't know. You never know what could happen.
You're certainly good at it. So, well, we don't want to go till the 11th hour if we can avoid it. But, no. We definitely have a lot to talk about. So I think that probably the best place to start, obviously, is, news and amuse, because obviously a lot has happened this week.
You don't ever want me to reach across you.
I understand. I am making it.
Scroll the little thing.
Scroll. Bingo.
See that?
So here we are. See, I actually was able to do something on my own. It's kind of like you got to learn to crawl before you learn to walk. So obviously I got that done. Where else would we obviously start? We have to start with Biden's joint session of Congress speech, if you will, and assessment of his 100 days so far in office. So again.
And what are we thinking of Joe's first 100 days in office?
Well, it's not a complete disaster, but it doesn't mean it's that good.
But we have a very low bar, people.
We do have a very
low bar.
Oh, come on, man. What are you talking about? A really great job so far.
Okay, so let's start out talking about the good thing.
The good thing is that Joe made sure to have something lined up for his 100-day speech so that he did look good and people were chatting him up. And that included AOC and Representative Jayapal basically rolling out the red carpet and saying that he has an record for how he's done so far.
I'm not getting that, but I am pleased about the $15 minimum wage.
The $15 minimum wage for federal contract workers is obviously a great start. You have to start somewhere. And listen,
it's workers and includes tipped workers.
That is true. And that is very important. And hats off to the president for doing that. And that is going to amount to about somewhere between 375 to 400,000 workers.
Yes. So that's a lot of people.
That is a lot.
It's obviously not as much as a federal mandate for a $15 minimum wage across the board. But it's no different than, I don't care how we get to Medicare for all, as long as we get there and get there soon. Yeah.
So if we have the opportunity to lower the Medicare eligibility age to 60 or even 55, as our good friend and local healthcare guru Cliff Easterman likes to say, it's going to basically become sort of that snowball effect down the mountain. Once you're able to get it moving and people can see the value in it, that's when you know it's going to happen. So all of these federal workers that will now have a $15 minimum wage, they're going to be very enthusiastic about. I think the average raise for them is going to be about $4 an hour. So that's pretty significant.
Yeah, no, the percentage increase is actually very significant and it's a big deal. So, I mean, that's definitely a good thing.
No, there's no question that is going to make a difference. It is definitely going to have some pretty solid effect in terms of, obviously the poverty issues that we have in this country. It is a poverty wage. I mean, even $15 an hour is not nearly enough.
And it doesn't happen overnight either.
No, it definitely doesn't.
There's that. It needed to happen 10 years ago. So
no, it definitely did. And of course, right now, knowing that there's going to be even greater pressure to basically say, well, that's great that the federal contract workers get $15 an hour, but what about us? You can't just give it to, one person. You got to give it to everybody.
So here would be my follow-up to Joe. Okay. This is what I would be like. Okay, that's great. You want to just give the $15 an hour minimum wage to federal workers. I would be fine with that if it came with a jobs guarantee. Because if it came with a jobs guarantee, that's essentially raising it across the board. Because if you have a guaranteed federal job at $15 an hour, that's going to force the hand of everyone else to be increasing their wages. So I don't mind this idea, but it should come with the jobs guarantee. And that would make more sense. And then he wouldn't have to raise the federal minimum wage. That would essentially force it.
Well, you have Representative Ayanna Pressley in Massachusetts who is advocating for the federal jobs guarantee right now. That's obviously a great piece of legislation.
I mean, well, that in conjunction with this would really solve the minimum wage problem.
And of course, we can plug another show, Macro and Cheese, Steve Grumbine.
Oh, yes.
Jen is going to be...
When is that dropping?
That is dropping on Saturday, I believe.
So guys, check out Macro and Cheese. That's our friend Steve Grumbine's podcast.
We also are now being followed on social media by Stephanie Kelton, who wrote The Deficit Myth.
Fancy.
So certainly would be interested in having her come on the podcast at some point. You know, we have to talk about...
You're digressing.
Well, you have to put all economic... potential options on the table.
Yeah, but this is at least something. But as far as the other stuff he's done in the first 100 days,
he's done a great job rolling out the vaccine distribution, at least from a federal.
The pandemic response
level.
Has been decent from him.
You got to give him where credit's due. But again, where's the bar?
The increase in the military budget. Not a fan.
No, I think we should talk about what's been good first, because there isn't a lot, and certainly give him credit where it's due. You know, he has made some progress. You can't just say that there hasn't been any progress, but again, like you said, the bar's so low.
I'm concerned about what's going to happen with the Iran deal. You know, like I feel like it's very tenuous. I mean, I've got some concerns.
One step at a time. So he has done a pretty solid job overall, I would say, with the vaccine rollout. Now, of course, there's many reasons why that is an issue, because they're giving massive, massive subsidies to private insurance and big pharma, which we'll get into, because he isn't reducing, he isn't allowing for negotiation of prescription drug prices. And we all know why that is. So in terms of that, also being pretty good. And then, of course, you look at the stimulus package that they have put out there. The best thing that's out there, forget about the $1,400 stimulus check, which is $600 less than what it should be. It's a one-time check. It's not reoccurring checks. People have accumulated so much debt over time. You can't hang your hat on that. But the child tax credit is a big deal for a lot of people. So I would say that those are the three things that he has done.
And we need to back up and at least address the fact that the $1,400 is garnishable and seizable.
It's garnishable and seasonable, and it was means tested.
Yeah.
So there are potentially tens of millions in this country who didn't get it, who should have gotten it. Because they were measuring income
based on prior COVID.
Of 2019, not 2020.
Right.
So you're already setting yourself up behind the eight ball in terms of, you know, where you're actually, or you should be at the very least, you know, quantifying exactly how you measure income in terms of people who are eligible for the check. And they were doing it in such a haphazard way. And you look, if we know these things, then they know these things.
Yeah, they just don't
doing
care.
It on purpose, which is what makes it so bad.
But one thing we were talking about last week was the UBI.
Yes.
And this is something that's interesting because of what's going on in California, because they just instituted, right? Wasn't that Garcetti? Mayor Garcetti is doing like the UBI?
Los Angeles, yes.
Okay. So there you've got, you know, California seemingly on the cutting edge. And now this is going on. And I hope that you know what you're going to talk about this, because I'm not as familiar with all things Governor Newsom. But this is apparently an ordeal going on in California.
Well, are we going to talk about the negative things about Biden's administration, and you want to wait for the end for that, because that could take a while?
Oh, you're still on that?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought we're moving on. Okay, we could still talk about that. You want to keep talking about? To me, there are just too many things to talk about.
There are, but you know what? You gotta, like I said, we give Biden credit where credit is due. You know, he got the child tax credit into the stimulus bill. That obviously is very important. He has done a very solid job overall, I would say, with the vaccine rollout. And he just gave 400,000 workers in this country a very big raise. That is going to help. So you have to give credit where credit is due there. However, that is where it begins and that's where it ends in terms of what he has done on a positive note when it comes to being the president. And I know a lot of people are all concerned about the fact that he is a very steady hand compared to Trump. You want to throw that in. Look, have at it as far as I'm concerned. I understand a lot of people got extreme anxiety about Trump being president, and they like having a guy now who just makes them feel okay.
Well, everything's better now.
But everything is not better now. And so his primary campaign promises. We'll see what happens with the $15 minimum wage. But overall, his primary campaign promises of a public option, of a $15 minimum wage across the board, student debt cancellation, green energy jobs infrastructure, and then ultimately pulling our troops out of Afghanistan has not kept his word on any one of them. And you are now past the 100-day mark. And what does that mean? It means that the mandate is now over. And it means that they're going to get into the weeds. And it also means that the GOP is going to start to essentially obstruct everything that they're going to do going forward. So that's going to be a pretty big issue. Joe is way too ready, willing, and able to do bipartisan work, when in reality, we're not doing any work for those that really need it. It's all about corporate versus non-corporate.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Bipartisan in and of itself is not a good thing.
No.
If our Congress decides to work together to do policies that are regressive for working people, that's not good, even though they're working together. So you can be working together for bad things. So the idea of bipartisanship is completely bogus. There's no there there. The issue is, what are they doing on the issue? Are they doing the right thing that's going to help the most amount of people? You know, so I love that term, though. It's such this like virtue signal kind of term that they use. Bipartisan. I'm the one who can reach across the aisle. Yes. Your tentacles are long enough to reach across the aisle.
I think it was actually, if I remember correctly, I think it was George Carlin who said, yeah, bipartisanship just means that they're finding a twice as hard a way to screw you over. So
yeah, it doesn't. I mean, that's just a silly thing to say anyway.
Yeah, we're
either you're on the correct side of an issue or you are not.
But we are certainly not in a situation where we are getting the true benefits of what's going on. And I would conclude Biden's 100-day, overall assessment, if you will, in terms of what it really means at this point, is if you are going to not stand on principle, if that is what is essentially happening now, that you are not going to actually fight the president, if he's not fighting on behalf of the people, keeping the promises that he made. I mean, look, there are so many other things we could get into in terms of what Biden is doing.
His rating is fairly low, though, yes?
It is now dropped to 52%. It was once, I think, just under 70. So he's already fading, and it's the third lowest in 80 years. The only two who have had a lower rating is Jimmy Carter, not a surprise, and Donald Trump, not a surprise. So to say that it's lackluster would be an understatement. The perception that he's actually doing well comes from this idea that he is a steady hand, which compared to Trump, he is a steady hand, but that is not enough. This country is suffering mightily, and it is not good enough to conclude that we're doing a good enough job.
I also think part of the reason it might seem like he's doing a good job is he's been really not present.
That's true.
This State of the Union, I think, was like the second time he's.
It's only the second time he's actually spoken in public since he's been president. Yeah. That's almost 4 months.
Yeah. So
that's right. That's a red flag.
It is. And so I wonder if a lot of the even existing approval that there is only based on there's no news is good news kind of thing. Like they're not seeing him. It must be fine. Everything's fine.
Well, I can agree with that. And the last thing I will mention, which I think is important, is when Pramila Jayapal goes on national TV and says that listen, it's one thing to say that Biden has done some good things. And yeah, we were really pushing for Joe. But to go on national TV and say that Biden has done an A job so far, that is the A is the grade you're giving him for what he's done so far. And people wonder why the left is so feckless.
We have talk about a soft grading system. Like that's a really soft grading system.
I mean, imagine if we were sitting,
low bar people.
Just imagine if we're sitting in a situation in the not too distant future where Pramila continues to kick the can down the road and doesn't think for a second that people are not going to come after her. If she continues to play this game of, yeah, we're not going to hold up votes for the sake of getting a public option, much less a vote on Medicare for all. We're not going to do anything in regards to a living wage, especially a $15 minimum wage. I am just throwing this out there as a warning shot. I think a lot of people in the progressive movement do not know how to organize properly or how to execute properly in terms of the candidates that they should get behind and where their allocation of funds should go. But I will say this. Kshama Sawant represents at the city level the area that Pramila Jayapal covers in Seattle, Washington.
That's very telling.
If Pramila does not get her act together, I would be making a push for Kshama Sawant to either primary Pramila or run as either an independent or with the new party, whatever. At some point, you have to make these people sweat. You got to make them sweat because otherwise power concedes nothing without demand. And this idea that they are going to laud President Biden without holding him accountable, listen, give him credit where it's due. But to say that he's doing an A grade A job as president. This is why people hate politics.
But again, we have very low standards. And I think that we're like battered spouses. We just don't think we deserve any better. And that's just where we are.
Nevertheless, that is our assessment, I would say, so far, as far as where the presidency stands. Obviously, a lot of things have to change, but you got to put the heat on. Now, again, it's not so easy to do that because, again, you want to be strategic and effective in terms of how you go about it. But Kshama Sawant is a rock star, and she is loved in Seattle, and they have come after her time and time again. At some point...
Yeah, she endured the whole wrath of Jeff Bezos.
If she could stand up to Jeff Bezos, who the hell is Pramila Jayapal?
Yeah, well, I think that's pretty telling. So, yeah, you would think. But, good luck to the people
you never
of
know
Seattle.
Listen, you never know, because at some point, the dam is going to break. And the one thing you know about Kshama is that if she were to challenge Pramila, she'd raise a lot of money. And that's ultimately what it comes down to for a lot of people. You have to be a commodity. She is. You have to raise the money. She can. And she has to be running against an opponent who is not living up to the credentials as the chair of the Progressive Caucus. She's not doing anything.
Well, none of them really kind of are.
And what I would do...
it's amazing to me that they even have a Progressive Caucus.
Well, at the bare minimum, what I would do is I would fire a warning shot. I would say, you're going to take initiative, and if you don't, we'll take it for you. So figure it out one way or the other. Because like I said, power concedes nothing without demand.
Unfortunately, that's not our district. So
not really but just a thought.
Yeah.
So with that said, speaking of primarying people,
yes,
it seems to me that there's a lot of life lessons to be learned here for who I assumed was going to be running for president in the not too distant future. And now he's running to save his neck. Gavin Newsom, the governor of California. Now, you can debate all you want about whether or not this is warranted, merited, all of that.
You're going to have to tell me the story because I am not really familiar. I mean, this was sort of who they were hoping could be like the next generation of their steady hand person.
Well, maybe that's why they're trying to prop up Mayor Pete. Because
he's like the good Cuomo.
The good Cuomo. Definitely not. So unfortunately, Newsom, like a lot of other big state governors, whether our governor DeSantis, who has horrifically handled COVID, Governor Cuomo, who has handled it the worst out of anybody, and now you have Governor Newsom in California. Now, how bad has he handled COVID? Can't really say for sure, but what I can say is that he has shut down the state multiple times. He has been mealy-mouthed about what is actually the proper procedure for people to follow as far as state guidelines, CDC guidelines. On top of that, when he had the opportunity to enact or select, if you will, the next U.S. senator for California, however temporary it may have been, because Kamala Harris ultimately became the vice president, instead of picking somebody who has not only paid their dues, but really works to the benefit of the people of California, the two people that come to mind probably more than anybody else,
Ro Khanna and
Barbara Lee. And ultimately, he chose none other than anti-Bernie partisan party hack, Alex Padilla.
Is this a roundabout way to getting to this recall story?
So the point is, now that Gavin Newsom is getting recalled, he's really not catching a lot of sympathy.
Well, wait, can you explain what is the cause of the recall?
What ultimately stemmed from this recall and why it really caught fire is a lot of people were upset with how he was handling the lockdown in California. He was caught in one of the most exclusive restaurants in California and probably not only the country, but in the world. It's a place called French Laundry. It's in Napa Valley. It's about, I don't know, $600 a person. You know, one of those extremely high-end places.
Wow.
He's not only eating there with a group of, I think, like 20 people, but they were all maskless.
Maskless.
And so this kind of set off this was the jump off point where people just said, I've had enough of this governor. I don't want to, we all know that everything he does is calculated based on where is he going next. And of course, Governor of California, Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, Jerry Brown, we've seen it before. They all end up either running or winning the presidency.
So who initiated this takedown?
Well, I don't know if there was a specific group, but this is a grassroots
always
effort.
Leads to something.
This is hey, look, Caitlyn Jenner's running for governor of California.
For God's sake.
So as if the sideshow couldn't get worse. But nevertheless, this is an issue here that is substantially significant because this was a guy who was absolutely going to carry the torch for the party at some point. And if he gets recalled, that's it. I mean, it's bad enough as it is, and I don't know how he's going to be able to stem the tide from something like this. But I do think that this is a significant problem. And so ultimately, what is going to come of it? Don't know for sure. But much like the jungle primary rules in California, the recall rules are very unique as well. So Newsom's in trouble. There's no question he's in trouble. Is it definite that
plot thickens?
Yeah, the plot does thicken. Now, I don't know which way this is going to go. I really don't. I don't really know one way or the other.
It's not looking good for a presidential bid at this point.
Definitely not. This is definitely not the type of thing that you want to have.
Not a good segue into that.
You definitely don't want this around your neck. There's no question you don't want this around your neck. It's really, really bad for him. And it is ultimately going to cost him significant political capital going forward because he's going to have to address this. He can't run away from it. And the fact that, like I said, sometimes it just takes a viral moment for you to go down. And the fact that he not only was with a group of people maskless, but he was in what you call high a high society as it gets.
You mean kind of like a wine cellar fundraiser kind of situation?
Well, Gavin is the nephew of Nancy Pelosi.
Oh, well.
So there you go.
Hoity-toity.
Well, hoity-toity. Well, just settle down. Just settle down. But again, they feed us. Remember that. They feed us. You know, this to me is, it's sad. It's very, very sad. But nonetheless, we really need better leadership. And again, it starts at the grassroots level. So in California, I don't know if they are planning on are the progressives going to attempt to nominate or draft a leader of sorts to run in this recall election? Yet to be determined. But I do think that they should, because in this type of recall election, you can have as many as 20 candidates running. I mean, this could be a free-for-all, because remember, with jungle primaries, it's not a primary in the traditional sense. No. This is Democrats and Republicans running together. So you never know.
Speaking of a free-for-all, we may or may not get to speak with Omari Hardy. He said he's going to try to get on Zoom after he debates. So he's going in to debate this bill, and we need all the help we can get on this bill.
Yes. So let's hope for the best.
Yeah, we'll see if he can make it on here. That would be great. If not, we'll reschedule.
Well, I know he's supposed to go. He's supposed to go on, I think, like local TV. Like
yeah,
NBC,
he's on a local tonight at 9
10 or something like that. So yeah, I mean, we may be up against it time-wise. We'll see.
Here, he just said, "Okay, I will click the link as soon as I'm done debating. I'm sorry about the delay. It's just difficult with the way Republicans are running the process." Yeah,
here.
Literally, that's the text.
No ish, Sherlock. Every time I think I'm going to say something negative, I'm not going to say it. I'm just going to bite my tongue. Because we don't want to get demonetized.
So but now our show is being held up by the Florida Republicans.
What a surprise. Because I'm not. Okay. I totally do it. Now, this was part and our final story, and hopefully Omari will be able to come on shortly. This is part of our news and amuse, but this is a story that extends even further than that. And I'm going to show you guys a new graphic that Jen has come up with.
Wait. But so I've sort of started this idea of that every episode we should have a story time. I believe in story time. I mean, of course, I always think of
I like stories.
I think story time is very important. And so I'm generally coming up with an idea of what would this story be that we're talking about. So, on 420, I did Stoned History, sort of like a take of drunk history. And I did the Kente Cloth Tales, the anthology of tone deafness.
Right.
And so we've had a few stories. And so I've come up with a good one for you. You want to do it?
I'm going to go one down.
Okay.
There we go.
So this is the Oligarch Chronicles.
I hope you guys like this look, because I think it just really fits the entire description.
The Oligarch Chronicles, tales of emasculated men vying to destroy the world. And that's a.
I mean, the capture of Gates is just so perfect.
It's all good.
And so, what we really wanted to talk about is, and which I think is the monumental story of the week and of recent memory, is
first tale in the Oligarch Chronicles
is Bill Gates and his decision not to release the vaccine formula to India, which is going through as bad a pandemic right now, maybe as any place in the world has since COVID took off. And he don't care.
Nope.
Because this is all about money and power. And let's see. Do any of you happen to know, without looking it up, how many acres of farmland Bill Gates owns just in the United States alone. This isn't even talking about Africa.
Oh,
that's a whole other story.
I don't even think we begin to know the depths of what goes on in Africa.
No. So as it turns out, 250,000 acres of farmland is what Bill Gates owns in the United States. That's
not
a lot.
Surprising. Well, he's essentially been working to co-opt our food source for years.
Correct.
He is obviously very big into GMOs. He's now controlling like the vaccine process. This is all very kind of scary to me.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but Bill Gates is not a doctor, right?
No, Bill Gates is not a doctor, but Bill Gates can purchase lots of doctors.
Oh, he most certainly can. Hey, look, he could probably spend enough money to make doctors whatever he says.
But I will say that, as you know, I have a friend who's very active in the anti-GMO community and has been always protesting and researching into Monsanto and all of the damage done there. And Bill Gates, for 20 years, has been very heavily involved in a lot of things going on in Africa regarding their agriculture and food source. I'd love to get somebody on here who could really talk about that because it's complicated. I don't completely I need somebody to explain to me, but I know that what he's doing is not for the best interest of the people in Africa. So whatever it is that he's doing is for him.
Bill Gates, unlike Jeff Bezos, Sheldon Adelson, Mark Zuckerberg, and even Elon Musk, he does not want to have a bad reputation. He actually cares about his reputation, and he goes to great lengths to protect it. He's also one of the biggest benefactors the Democratic Party has ever had. So it buys you a lot of political capital to make you look like a good guy. He is having a little bit of a hard time sweeping this under the rug, and rightfully so, because tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people are going to die in India. And he is directly responsible. He has blood on his hands.
I don't understand how I do. I mean,
but when you own,
these are psychopathic people.
But when you own our country, this is what we talk about when it comes to the owners. When you own GE, when you own Comcast, when you own News Corp, all of these organizations that control our media, directly related to the elimination of the Fairness Doctrine under Reagan in '87, and the implementation of the Telecom Act in '96 under Clinton. These men now run the world. And no one in high society on those networks is ever going to say that Bill Gates is a fascist tyrant, which he is, try to have a totalitarian control over the world.
Yeah.
Because that is the goal.
But I see them all as this. Like, I really do. That's what this is. And there was recently this whole thing about this sort of showdown between Elon Musk and Bezos regarding their space programs. And it was literally pictures of them standing on stages in front of whatever their rockets were. And all I could think of was, my rocket's bigger than your rocket. My rocket's going to get to space faster than your rocket. These are definitely men that have some emasculation problems, that are just vying for, and it's really, it's pathetic. It's pathetic. And people idolize these people.
Well, they defend them in a way that I'm not 100% sure what the motivation is.
No, the motivation is we idolize wealth, we prioritize money, and we associate money with success. And to us, people that are the richest means that they're the most successful. And it's just sort of a sad commentary on our priorities. But I've been thinking that for years with people that are rich for being famous and famous for being rich, but really don't do anything. And, you know, these people are just, it's like a bunch of, this is just the guys who were playing D&D in high school that have expanded tech-wise, and they're now kind of playing it with countries. Well, and these are the same dorks that probably could not get laid to save their lives.
And again, I've always said that there really is something to be said for this psychology of what ultimately ends up happening with people in grade school who were picked on, who were, you know, who never got the girl, who never excelled at athletics. They ultimately excel in high brain functional tactics and careers and things of that nature. And some of them are just really, really savvy in terms of how they go about getting exactly what they want. Because for a lot of them, the hole can never be filled.
No, there's never going to be enough money. There's never going to be enough power. There's never going to be enough control.
Mark Zuckerberg is one of the best examples of that. Like Mark Zuckerberg, think of the lengths that Zuckerberg went to screw people over to basically own Facebook in its initial stages. And I was one of the early people who used Facebook. I was in college. I was in my sophomore year in 2004 when this thing started popping up, because I never got MySpace. I never really understood it, and I was never really interested in it. But Facebook came along, and it was kind of this interesting way of connecting with people. And I actually thought that there was some merit to it and some value. And little by little, you learned just where this was going to go. And eventually it just became this way of pitching everything that you own and selling it for a premium. And it's just one big advertisement. That's what Facebook now is. It used to be a way to have a networking capability, and it still is. I'm not going to say that it isn't that. But the reality is, Zuckerberg was somebody who always saw this as my way to get to the next level. And a great way to tell that, and as we talk about, the psychological effects that happen with certain emasculated men who feel like they're not measuring up in society. Look at Mark Zuckerberg and look at the two men in particular that he screwed over. The
Winklevi.
Tall, athletic, handsome, successful, and
also complete products of nepotism, wealth, and privilege as well. So,
Correct.
They just happen to be good looking.
So you take somebody like Zuckerberg, and he looks at somebody like that and sees them with the women that they're getting and things like that, and their attitude is, I'm going to show them. I'm going to get it. I'm going to make it, and I'm going to take over the world. I'm not just going to take over a little slice of pie. I'm going to get the whole frickin' pie, and you're all going to be eating out of my hand. And every day, I'm telling you, it's like they stand in the mirror and they tell themselves, this is how we take over the world. And the GOP in the state of Florida believes that you have to eat out of their hands. So without further ado,
Omari just jumped on. We're going to do this because he is at the Capitol and he is fighting for the vote against the Voter Suppression Act.
Yes, he most certainly is.
Hi.
Good evening, my friend.
Hi, how are you? Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. Okay. It might not be you though. It could be someone else just voicing you. We'll never really know.
Right.
If you have a second, why don't you get everybody up to speed? What's going on? Obviously, this is a more or less a mirror bill of what they just passed in Georgia, and of course, so now just try to add in a whole bunch of things to make it even more difficult for people to vote.
Right. And so, look, this is a historically bad legislative session, I just have to say. I think part of it has to do with the fact that the legislature and the leadership of the legislature is using COVID-19 to shut down the Capitol and to prevent citizens from observing the process, and to prevent people's voices from being heard, for example, in public comment and committee meetings and so on. And, what happens when you have probably one of the most ideologically right-wing Senate presidents and speakers, along with Governor DeSantis, during an environment like this? Well, you get some really, really bad bills. Yesterday, things were moving very quickly. We thought that we had killed the ban on transgender athletes participating in sports, but they brought that back and amended it into a broader bill about charter schools, and it rapidly passed the House. They limited debate on it to 3 hours. They TP'd nearly all of our amendments, and it went over to the Senate immediately thereafter, and they ruled out of order all the Democratic amendments on that bill and passed it pretty much in short order over the objections, even of a Republican lawmaker, a Republican senator who has a transgender child. And so, that's the kind of stuff that we've been seeing throughout this session. This is now our second time hearing SB 90, the voter suppression bill here in Florida. It has been amended several times. And while it is a less egregious version of the original bill, it's still a voter suppression bill. The purpose of the bill is to make it harder for Floridians to vote, harder for Floridians to access the ballot. It is also to make it more expensive for supervisors of elections to do the sorts of things that encourage voter participation. For example, it requires supervisors to man physically drop boxes where people are dropping off their ballots while not providing them any additional funding for this. In addition to that, it prohibits supervisors of elections from placing drop boxes at any place where they do not have a permanent branch office. So they are only allowed to put drop boxes at their main office, at their main office or at early voting sites. But as you know, there are not many early voting sites, and in large and populous counties, for example, like Palm Beach County, Broward County, Miami-Dade County, the distance between a person's home and that drop box site may be serious. The traffic may be serious. Folks oftentimes do not have access to vehicles. They may not have transportation. And that's why it made sense for supervisors of elections to place drop box in neighborhoods, in community centers, and in other secure places, government buildings, city halls, town halls, so on and so forth, so that folks can have access to the ballot, and so that folks will not have to rely on a postal service that is being actively sabotaged by a Trump appointee in order to get their ballots in on time. In addition to that, it creates a crime of possessing two or more ballots, more than two ballots that are not your own in a single election. And you know, this whole issue of, you know, what Republicans call ballot harvesting is interesting. I recognize that some of my Democratic colleagues are afraid to talk about this in a way that makes sense, because the polling on the words ballot harvesting is not good. But you can't just govern based off polling. Here's the question. If I have a vote by mail ballot and I put that ballot in by the way, I'm an eligible voter. I fill out that ballot. I put it in the envelope. I sign the envelope, put all the other information on it that allows the supervisor of elections to verify that it was me. My signature matches. What changes when I hand that ballot to another person? Does that ballot somehow become less legitimate? Does that ballot somehow become corrupt because I have allowed someone who's not my immediate family, perhaps a coworker, perhaps a friend, perhaps my girlfriend? Well, I'm married now, but if I were not married, you know, nothing changed. You know, ballots are not Schrodinger's cats of elections. You know, they don't change or somehow become corrupt or disappear upon observance. So anyway, you know, the point is, this is a bill to make voting more difficult and to make it harder for supervisors of elections to do the sorts of things that allow folks to participate more easily in our democracy.
So we're going to not have that long with you tonight, because I know that you have another interview that you've got to go to. And you just announced that you're running for seat 20. And for people who are watching, that is Alcee Hastings' seat. Congressman Hastings died recently, and so that's an open seat now. And then we want to get into that so people can see who you are as a candidate for that more, you know, in the time we have. So I know that you had some stuff that you wanted to talk about regarding that.
Omari, you know, you and I go back a number of years. Obviously, this is going to be a very sought after seat. And of course, one is going to have to distinguish themselves from the rest of the pack. Aside from obviously what I think is, you know, you obviously want to have an inside outside strategy when it comes to, you know, progressive politics. Already made it very clear about your policies, which is great. But of course, one of those things that really distinguishes yourself from the rest of the candidates is you are not going to be taking corporate special interest money. I think that is the signature issue of our time when it comes to electoral politics. We really have to change that narrative and how that is done. Aside from that, what are some of the things that you believe distinguishes your candidacy from the other candidates who will be running in this race?
Well, let me say first, given that I am in a state building in the Florida Capitol, I'm just going to refrain from getting into the case for my candidacy.
Sure.
Okay.
So, you know, perhaps, and I did not anticipate being in the Capitol at this time.
Yeah.
You know, they had us on recess earlier because the Senate was still debating this, and they sent it back. So my apologies there, but just to keep it all kosher, I won't be able to comment on that in this place.
Okay, so I guess then we could talk about it in a broader sense, which would be, I was informed that you were a Hillary supporter back in 2016. And so when I look at someone who's now not taking corporate money, I want to know, where was that transition for you, where you basically decided that this is the route that better serves people, or what it was that came to your mind that created an idea of being non-corporate candidate?
Well, just to avoid the appearance, so again, it's still about my candidacy. I can only comment generally about my thoughts about, well, first off, how I came to be progressive and how that affects my role as a state legislator. And I'll comment on what I think about money and politics generally, and on what myself and Anna Eskamani attempted to do a few days ago. So yes, I did support Hillary Clinton in 2016. The pandemic was actually the 4 years during Trump, but especially the pandemic was a sort of radicalizing event for me, because it became pretty clear how high the deck is stacked against working class people. And it also became pretty clear how quickly and how easily people in government can help working class people when they want to. And in addition to that, we talk about money in politics. We had a bill here that started out as a very uncontroversial elections or campaign finance bill. The bill was filed by Representative Payne, a Republican, and it would have prevented state candidates from terminating their campaign funds accounts by donating to charities that they are employed by, or charities that they run, right? Because currently you can do that, and I've seen people do it, and it's a way that special interests pay candidates either to get out of races or to pay them after having won. And I've seen that on a few occasions locally, and it has happened at the state level. Then he amended the bill after it had been through two committees. When it got to the last committee, he added an amendment to limit contributions to ballot initiative campaigns here in the state of Florida to $3,000 per contributor. Now, typically, I am for limiting contributions. The problem is the motivation behind this amendment was to stop all the constitutional amendments that have been passed that are progressive. The $15 minimum wage, which was financed largely by Attorney John Morgan. The medical marijuana constitutional amendment, which was financed also largely by Attorney John Morgan, right? And so, that is an example of people working together with folks who share our values to do an end run around the legislature, which refused to pass a living wage and which refused to legalize cannabis. So what they're doing is trying to stop that with this bill. And so what Representative Eskamani and I did, we proposed a few amendments, basically asking the legislature to eat their own cooking. If we're going to limit contributions to political committees for citizen ballot initiatives, why don't we limit contributions to our own political committees, which are currently unlimited? And of course, that was shut down. It wasn't a part of the original bill, and so on and so forth. So speaking generally, I think one way that we can purify our politics is to get corporate money out of it. Because as I've seen and as I have learned, folks, even if it does not sway you, folks believe that they will be able to sway you and that they will be able to have greater access to you because they contributed to your campaign. And that's true not only of the contributors having that belief, but it's also true of the general public. And so if the public loses confidence in your integrity, or if the public loses confidence of the integrity of an entire legislative body, such as the Florida House, because of the presence of corporate money, then you shouldn't be allowed to take it. And that's something that I've had to learn here, because frankly, it's the corporations run this place. And it's very, very unfortunate And yeah, so my position on money in politics, I've seen it at work here in the Florida legislature, and it's not good. And frankly,
it's not pretty.
Yeah, but look, if it were up to me, we would give each citizen a voucher, so that they could contribute to a campaign of their choice.
So you more or less support that notion.
Democracy dollars.
Yeah, Andrew Yang came up with democracy dollars. I think
they did a version of that in Seattle that is more effective than not doing it. There are some tweaks that they need to make to it, but yeah. And what's funny? There was a representative here, Representative Randy Fine, who questioned Anna Escamani, who has in the past, like all of us here who have gotten here, taken money from a corporation at one time, and said, well, it seems to me like you're a hypocrite. And, what Anna had to tell him and what I had to tell him was that, look, we are, first of all, most of us are not celebrities. Most of us are not well known. We don't have access to the thousands and thousands of people who share our progressive values and who can donate $5, $10, $15. And so getting here, yes, Anna took money from corporations. And by the way, the same for me. But now that we have this platform, and now also that we've seen how it works, it's clear that there's an issue here. I mean, we had, for example, one industry, the sugar industry, who is being sued for fouling the air that people of color in the Glades breathe. They basically got the legislature to change the law in the middle of their lawsuit to moot the lawsuit. Imagine having that degree of power to where you get sued, and rather than being held accountable, you get the legislature to change the law in the middle of the lawsuit. That's what happens when you donate $11 million in a campaign cycle. And so that kind of stuff is just not. I mean, you think about it. That's like 2 gubernatorial races at least.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable, and it shouldn't be allowed.
Yeah, and what people don't realize is that it's across the board, partisan wise, because the Florida Democratic Party is very beholden to Big Sugar and Walmart. Those are like 2 of their biggest donors to the state party.
Yes.
And so that's a problem. And that's especially a problem for progressive candidates, because not only do you not want to take corporate money, but you're also not going to get help of the party infrastructure, because they're generally not going to be on your side.
And something, here's what I'll say. It takes one to kind of break the break the mold and to break the cycle. And, Anna for me was that one, because she showed that it's possible to run a people powered campaign at this level. For candidates who have basically, a fear about, whether they will be able to stay in office or to attain higher office. Folks have shown that you don't have to compromise your values in order to win an election. And frankly, Anna and Carlos Guillermo Smith, who are 2 progressive champions here, have been fantastic examples and inspirations, not only for me, but for other people who are in this body. So I would say to other folks who are contemplating running for office, you can do it. It's possible. You don't need to take corporate money. And that's the extent to which that I can comment.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And, look, there's a lot of people jumping in the race that you're in. And I know that it's going to be like pretty prickly, but what would you say issue wise are the key things that you're looking at in your district that are things that you really think need the most work right now?
Or that would obviously need the help from the federal level.
Yeah, like the things that seat could be helping.
That's a little closer.
Too close.
To So what I'll say is, the issues that I fought for at the local level and that I'm fighting for right now in the state level, as I contemplate whether to vote for this budget, are affordable housing and healthcare in particular here at the state level. Also issues dealing with resilience and equity and how we address climate change. Governor Ron DeSantis and Speaker Chris Sprowls cooked up this idea of a Resilient Florida grant program, which would give grants to local governments to address the symptoms only unfortunately, of climate change, which is sea level
we
rise.
We talked about that the other day. It doesn't address the causes.
Right. And, what was interesting was that when you looked at the criteria for applying for a grant and for getting a grant, ranked very highly was the ability to come up with matching dollars for the grant. And ranked far below that was if you're from a community that is financially distressed or financially disadvantaged. And in advocating for some amendments to this bill, I pointed out that you could have two applications that are exactly the same, but the community that has the money for the matching dollars is going to win out over the financially disadvantaged community, who, because they're financially disadvantaged, can't come up with the matching dollars. And I advocated for them to inject some equity into this Resilient Florida grant program. So if they're not going to address the root causes, and if they are going to focus only on armoring our coasts and preparing ourselves for the floods that will come because of climate change, which is caused by human beings, then the very least we could do is to do it equitably and ensure that small financially disadvantaged cities, for example, like Riviera Beach, which is in my state legislative district, have the same ability to access these dollars as, for example, Palm Beach Gardens, which is a much more affluent community in Palm Beach County. And so one of the things that they did actually change in the bill was creating an entire carve out for financially disadvantaged communities, not just cities, but counties, so that they're not penalized for not having the matching funds. So that's something that I have frankly cared about at a local level. It's something that I care about here at a state level. It's something that I advocate for here in the House. But Medicaid expansion here in the state, it's very frustrating. And speaking on the budget earlier today, the federal government threw $3.5 billion at the state of Florida, in addition to the original funding that they would provide for us to expand Medicaid. They were literally making it profitable for the state of Florida to provide health care to the 900,000 plus Floridians who fall within that gap to where they're not covered by Medicaid, but they don't qualify for the subsidies under Obamacare. And again, for the umpteenth year in a row, we refuse to expand Medicaid, even though it would literally save the state of Florida approximately $200 million a year. It's really tragic, but those are the issues that I care about. Also, affordable housing here in the state of Florida, in my capacity as a state legislator, is something that I have advocated for throughout this process. And also at the local level was for full funding of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Every year since 2003, the legislature has stolen from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and used it for other purposes, in particular to finance tax cuts and other programs. Yeah. But last year was the first year they didn't steal from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. But then Governor DeSantis vetoed, using his line item veto, funds out of the appropriations for housing. And this year, what did we do? We restructured the entire program to permanently cut funding for affordable housing. And that is a tremendous tragedy. And it's something that's going to have to change in the state of Florida.
Well, we know you're up against it time-wise. It is 9 o'clock. I'm sure you're going to be getting that call. We would love to have you on again so we can talk.
When you're not in the State House and you could be a little bit more, less covert.
But you are.
And maybe not have your face covered.
Yes. And on top of that, we are huge supporters as well of Anna Escamani. She's done amazing work.
She's phenomenal.
Yep. She came on our podcast and she just has that fire that we really need. And everything is a process. But if you and her are locking arms, and obviously Carlos as well, change is going to come. And it just takes one Omari. And we really appreciate you coming on this evening. Thank you so much. And we certainly hope you come back soon.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Omari. Bye.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, I put that up just so that people could see what he looks like without a mask.
Yes.
It seemed kind of pertinent.
And listen, we're very grateful that he came on. Obviously, this was he didn't want to have to not show up. He did this as
and I appreciate it. He came through, and I appreciate it.
Give him credit. Great. And he was very he's very guarded. He's very sharp. He's very sharp. He knows his ish. He definitely knows what he's talking about. And of course, he really hit on some of those primary issues. The thing that I think he's observed, which I'm sure Anna has observed as well, is that the reason why it's so important, potentially people like yourself and others, to get to Capitol Hill is because the Florida GOP at the state level, at Tallahassee, will do everything in their power, not only to block every piece of progressive legislation, but even when progressive legislation passes, they will do everything in their power to make sure people don't get it.
Well, I mean, they just consistently legislate against the majority.
And with all due respect, but the congressional representatives that we have here in the state of Florida are either feckless or completely bought off by corporate money, or they're just complete dinos disguised as Democrats.
I mean, but I do want to say something about, about that seat that he's running for, because, and I've said this before, it's a lot easier to run for a seat that nobody is sitting in. And I have a lot of respect for people that challenge sitting incumbents versus waiting for an open seat. So that to me boosts people up points. And that's the one thing that I always talk about Sheila, is Sheila McCormick was the only person who really had the balls to challenge Alcee when he was sitting there. And that speaks volumes to me, it does. And so, that's something that I use as a factor in terms of who do I really want to support. And I obviously didn't really get into enough stuff with Omari where he was able to really answer questions. So, I like to sort of, like you had said, what's his come to Jesus moment from going from supporting a candidate like Hillary to now being against corporate money?
Well, I can remember when we first met back in like 2014, 2015. I mean, he's always been dapper. He's always, you could always tell that his
nothing wrong with that.
No, but you could always tell that his goal was to get into elected office. There's no question that was what he was going to do. And I remember having a conversation with him about, me being a supporter of Bernie and him being a supporter of Hillary, and just thinking, well, what's the disconnect here? One's corporate, one's non-corporate. And until that point, he wasn't actually elected into anything. And I guess once he got elected, he finally understood what we meant when we said that if you are on the corporate special interest payroll, you literally have both hands tied behind your back.
Yeah.
You do not have an opportunity to really make your case as a candidate or anything beyond that, as far as whatever aspirations you may have. And that could be city politics, probably even more so at the state level. And he understands, being in Tallahassee, knowing that every day you go into work, it basically is flooded with corporate lobbyists that are there to disrupt the process.
What's interesting is we've had a few different people, mostly at the city level, say things to us along the lines of, oh, well, you could take the money and you're still going to do what you want to do. You don't have to do what the donor wants you to do. And I think maybe at a city level that works because you're talking about $500 or whatever it is. And so maybe because
the
it's
city
like
elections are a little bit more different because you actually are in the community and people know who you are. And if they like you, they're going to elect you.
That's
when
true.
You become even a state house representative, you're not meeting with everybody. They don't all know who you are necessarily. So there is that disconnect, and then the money just becomes completely uncontrollable.
It's just one of those things. And I liked what he said about that. It's the appearance of that.
Impropriety.
I've always said that it's the appearance of impropriety, but on both sides, on the side of the people that think that they own you, and on the side of the people that are looking at you taking that money. I mean, it just doesn't work. It's just not working for us.
No, it definitely doesn't. And again, I feel that a lot of people will eventually experience that, and there is no question. You could tell.
Green New Deal.
You can tell it's the Green New Deal, Brad. That's what GND is. And you can really tell just with Omari and his 20 minutes that he had with us. Anna works very well up in Tallahassee.
Yeah.
And that is why she needs to run for governor.
And look, we've mentioned it before. We would obviously be very supportive of that.
If you can convert people who were political moderates into what now seems to be somebody who is passionately progressive. This is not something that I can't necessarily say wasn't the task of Omari, just learning the ropes and would have figured it out on his own. But here's somebody like Anna who basically is showing them not only that being progressive is the way, it's the way because it's the non-corporate way and it's the only way to be.
Yes.
And eventually you recognize that sometimes you're just kind of drafted into these opportunities. Now, in my humble opinion, as I've stated before, I believe Ron DeSantis is going to win re-election.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't run.
And it doesn't mean that you can't get some sort of momentum going and start a better progressive movement at the state level. Right now, we don't have that. We really don't.
A lot of people still don't know who Anna is. And if she were ultimately to run for governor, her name recognition would take off like a rocket ship. Now, would it be enough to clip DeSantis? Probably not.
Not necessarily the first time.
But if she ran again in 2026?
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing.
And this is somebody who, with all due respect to Andrew Gillum, this lady has no baggage.
Right.
Literally
She's
zero.
no skeletons.
The only thing that she has working against her, and this is coming from somebody who's lived in South Florida for almost a decade now.
She's going to have a bigotry problem.
She is going to have a bigotry problem. She is Iranian, and this is a very Jewish part of the state.
Well, and it isn't even that. Also, it's her name.
Oh yeah,
you know, like
Eskimo. Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't think her name.
I don't know.
It's
very. I don't know. It's more ethnic than what a lot of people would necessarily be, you know, in favor of. Especially for someone who is not known.
And again, statewide, but I don't think Escamani's that. You know, again, it's like if Ted Deutsch ran. Yeah, he's Jewish, but it doesn't strike you.
I don't know.
That's that name.
She'll definitely. That is definitely one of the ways that they're going to have to attack her.
Oh, 100%.
Is they're going to make an issue of her heritage.
Well, because Anna is again the progressive. The growing progressive base in this state is not down here. It's actually up in the I-4 corridor between Tampa and Orlando. That's where it's happening, and that's where she is.
Yeah.
Nikki Fried is from down here. And this is essentially her territory, if you will. And they are going to go to great lengths to protect her because she is going to be the establishment choice. I still think Anna needs to run. I really do. I don't know how we get her in the race. She's ultimately going to have to decide for herself if that's really what she wants to do. But I really think she should.
And then we'll have her back on the show.
Absolutely, we would. And like I said, you could tell Omari couldn't stop lauding her and talking about how great she is.
You know what?
And
maybe it's
says
because,
a lot.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's the plan, is to, you know, build that up.
Maybe so. But again, somebody who is fighting on behalf of the people, who is not bought by corporate special interests, who understands, who made statements on our show that even if I was working with her, wouldn't necessarily think was necessarily the best thing to say. But you know what? Anyone who's willing to be 100% transparent, they have my respect. I don't care where they are in the political spectrum. Just be honest. That's what most people want. Honesty and integrity above everything else is what people want. Then you could debate the issues, because that is something that at one point or another, if you present the right argument, people will see it and say, yeah, that does make sense. And so
happy birthday, Leroy.
And so I do think that there is a lot to talk about. And yeah, I think Omari's going to make his case. And I think obviously Sheila, who has made her case time and again, but they are definitely the two non-corporate progressives running for this seat. And again, it's going to get ugly.
I know.
There's no question it will. We all know who the establishment may ultimately coalesce behind. But there's a lot of them that are in this race. So I don't think this is a very clear-cut thing. Get ugly. I think it will, but I don't think it's clear-cut. I don't think it's clear-cut.
All right, so let's move on.
So we have one final thing to do.
Well, first of all, before we do that, maybe we should talk about that tomorrow we're going to be doing mobile school pantries.
Yes, so, update on GenCore.
Yeah, GenCore update. So
website's about to launch.
Any day now.
Any day now.
Any day now. Few little minor changes.
Yes. Few little minor minutia that has to be updated.
Tomorrow we will be at what school are we at tomorrow? Martin Luther King.
Fort Lauderdale.
But it's MLK.
I'm pretty sure.
For the love of all that is holy. All right, let me see. I'm just going to double check.
Oh, I could be wrong.
Yes, MLK. Tomorrow, mobile school pantry distribution at MLK, which is in Fort Lauderdale, 3 to 6. If you're available in the morning to go from 11 to 2 to the Pompano Place, please check out mobileschoolpantry.org. The address is on there. We could always use help. And that's really what's going on this week. I don't think I have anything. Saturday, we'll have small business canvassing.
Yes.
And on Monday, our guest is a gentleman named Nick Buxton, who I came across doing an interview on Activism Munich, which is one of the sources that I use.
Yeah, Kira.
Yay, Kira. I watch, just for anybody who wants to know, one of the places that I do get news is a YouTube channel called Activism, and the TV are bold. So it's Activism Munich. And I was watching this guy talk about his knowledge on how our military industrial complex is basically the root of our climate crisis and the multiple facets of that. It was really interesting. So we're going to be talking a lot about the military industrial complex on Monday night. And really, it is the biggest source of climate crisis that we're dealing with. And all of us switching to hybrids will not make a bit of difference if we keep our military at the rate that it is.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So
and that more than anything else, in terms of what Biden has done badly, he has increased already the military budget by $20 billion. And that makes you think, well, okay, let's say we do get out of Afghanistan. Do you really think we're not going somewhere else?
Well, and what does that mean when you say you're getting out of Afghanistan?
Correct.
We're out of other places, but yet we're drone bombing them. But then it doesn't count because we don't have troops on the ground. And so getting out of is just way too of an amorphous phrase. I don't want to hear we're getting out of anywhere. Okay? Because that doesn't mean anything. No. It has no weight to it.
It doesn't. And so that in itself is as much as any problem that we face.
So we can wrap up with our bootlicker.
Because
I love a good bootlicker.
We are going to give a big shout out right now to
who
is not a friend of the show yet, but would love to be if he ever considered it. He is such a recluse. But Kyle Kalinske of Secular Talk did an amazing job today. Kyle. Did an amazing job today covering a very, very important topic, which of course is this whole woke/cancel culture problem that we have to deal with in politics.
Well, we talk about it all the time.
Yes.
We talk about it incessantly, like that this is the reason we can't get out of our own way. This is why we can't have nice things. And this is why people don't like us.
The reason why Kyle did a spot on it today is because it has shown the effects electorally that leaning into this non-economic, very mundane
and identity issue
that doesn't actually solve problems. No. It only creates more problems.
Yeah, the solution can only be found through addressing the economic crisis.
And a lot of the economic issues in this country directly relates to racial problems, to poor, plighted problems, environmental problems. You could go on and on. Yeah. But if you're not leaning into the fact that we don't have a living wage, that we do not have a federal jobs guarantee, we do not have UBI, we do not have a green energy jobs infrastructure program, I could go on and on.
Well, and this is something that we are definitely going to address on Monday with Nick, because one of the things that he talks about is the transitioning from our military spending into a green infrastructure program.
Correct.
And people don't think about like how we use energy from the different angles that we use it. First, there's the amount of fuel that they consume. Then there's the amount of emissions that they put out.
I also want to talk, and the thing that we really could do here in the state of Florida, as we are talking about in terms of initiatives that are completely nonpartisan.
Yep.
Community gardens throughout the state. And we have to figure out a way to ban plastic.
Yeah.
It has gotten to the point now where if we are going to be able to do something, dealing with the plastic crisis is a big thing.
And I think that's going to be really hard because you already see our state legislature doing this such anti-home rule legislation that really is going to prohibit locals and municipalities from banning plastic.
But this is exactly why we have to turn this into a statewide
initiative. It has to be a statewide initiative.
Everyone who wants to understand why electoral politics can't work on its own, just look at Florida. Because in this state, we have passed good legislation that never gets implemented because the GOP simply breaks the law. Yes, they break the law. We should have a $15 minimum wage as the state law. It is not the state law because the Florida GOP thinks they can break the law.
Well,
and they break the law.
They do. Well, they modify. All right. So do you want to talk about
what we want,
do our bootlicker?
And the reason why we bring this up, and the reason why we bring up this get woke, go broke, if you will, culture that is a very big problem when it comes to getting anything done in politics. Jenna, unfortunately, has been subjected to this problem. We now have a very serious problem that has infiltrated, as we know, on late night television. And where has that been infiltrated any worse than Saturday Night Live?
Really, all these guys are just such like little corporate whores. They're just little corporate whores.
It's not even funny anymore.
No, well, look, they haven't been funny in a long time.
And there's only been a handful of runs where it was actually really good.
But here's the thing.
It's terrible.
So our bootlicker of the week is none other than Lorne Michaels. But what's so like ridiculous about him is that he does it contrary to the wishes of his people on his staff and his writers and his actors and his comedians. And, they don't want this. So anyway, he is having none other than one of our members from the Oligarch Chronicles, Elon Musk, will be hosting Saturday Night Live. Now, personally, I don't watch Saturday Night Live. I don't really care.
Neither do I.
I couldn't care less. But I think that that's really frustrating for people that work there. They were also like this when he wanted Trump to come on. They hated having Trump there. They didn't want to work with him. And apparently everything fell really flat because they were just not wanting to work with him. So who knows what's going to happen with Elon Musk. But I would like to point out the double lick.
Yes.
When you got to taste both boots.
Well,
I love the double lick.
You know, who knows what type of a contribution, Elon has made to
Comcast
or who knows what. I mean, again, I don't want to assume anything, but what I can say, and I think most would agree, is Lorne Michaels has been the executive producer for, the showrunner for Saturday Night Live since it began.
He's basically the Nancy Pelosi of late night television.
He's been there for 46 freaking years.
Yeah.
You believe that?
Yes, I do, because I
46
actually
years.
was a little kid when he was there. Oh, yeah, I do know that.
And there was a time where he knew what he was doing.
Well, and this is the thing about a lot of people, that they get very stuck and very comfortable and very complacent, and they get very entitled. And I think it's the same in multiple industries. Like I said, this is no different than what we have sitting in Congress.
And
is that any different than Chuck Schumer?
Well, Chuck Schumer,
just sitting there forever.
Yeah, this and it to me, it really speaks to a really big problem where no one wants to voluntarily give up their power. Nobody. It gets to a point where it's like Lorne knows that he really shouldn't be doing what he's doing. The show hasn't evolved. It's totally flat. It has been for many, many years. I don't know who the hell watches Saturday Night Live.
And it's sad because there are actually some decent people on there.
Sure, there are some. Listen, to me, I look, you could say all you want about, the people that have been on the show for a while. Some of them are talented. I'm not going to say that is not. Look,
I like Kate McKinnon.
Kate McKinnon.
I think she's great.
Is absolutely a super talent.
Yeah.
You don't have to like her political leanings.
No, that's irrelevant.
The truth is, she's done some amazing skits, and she's very funny. She is. But other than her, there really isn't a lot to, write home about.
No, it hasn't been funny in a long time.
There's been what I would call 3 heydays of the show. There was the original cast and a couple of other add-ons along the way, but essentially the ones that started.
Eddie Murphy.
Yes, but that wasn't a great run of the show. Eddie Murphy was on at a very interesting time when the show wasn't that good. The point is, they had a great run in the mid-'70s with the likes of Bill Murray, Gilda Radner, Dan Aykroyd, Chevy
the original
Chase,
Not
Jane
Ready
Curtin,
for Primetime Players,
John Belushi. Then it was they went through many lean years until the late 80s, where they got Phil Hartman, they got Dana Carvey, they got Kevin Nealon, where they you had Chris Farley, who eventually came on. Jan Hooks was really good. They had a really good cast. And then you had the late 90s, early 2000s, which of course was Will Ferrell. You had, look, Jimmy Fallon had his moments. You're going through the
entire history of the script.
My point is that they've had a few runs where they were really good. But as a body of what the show has been over time, it's not that good.
No, it really isn't.
And now it is really coming to a head where Elon Musk, yes, Mr. Super Billionaire, I'm saving the planet with my electric car.
This is what they're speaking truth to power. This is a show that's supposed to be speaking truth to power. This is a show that's supposed to be that.
And let me say this for people in the audience who think that we don't care about what Elon Musk initially is fighting for the most part. What he's fighting for is actually good. But you can fight for good things and still be a complete freaking tyrant. That is entirely possible as well.
We can address this, but I wanted to say something. So thank you, Leroy. I have zero interest in ever running for a statewide position.
I would consider running for a statewide position.
There you go. Maybe he'll run against Rubio. I have no interest in running for a statewide position. But you must have put something out the other day that gave the hint of that, because I got a text from somebody saying, "Are you running for governor?" And I'm like,
no,
what? And apparently you put something out about, we can do this in the state, who's with me, or some sort of thing that would have led somebody who is already clearly a little bit to have the innuendo. So it's partially in what you put.
Unfortunately, people can't read between the lines.
But no, I have no intention of, I have no desire to run for a statewide race. Covering this district was enough for me. But yeah.
Yeah, if you're going to run for statewide office in Florida, you better have
way too much. We need way more money.
No, it's not just money. You need name recognition. You need an initiative that people believe in, that gets people talking, that they really like and want to fight on your behalf. You can't just do it in a vacuum. You can't. And running for Senate, listen, I give Alan Ellison all the credit in the world, and he is grounding and pounding and doing everything he can, and he is doing it clean. But the second that Val Demings decides that she's jumping in that race, he's going like,
we'll see what happens
with the money. And that's my
That's
fear.
what I said. It's about the money.
Yeah.
And look, we have yet to see, really, Bernie isn't going to count for this. In the new era, we have yet to see somebody pull off a non-corporate race in the Senate. We haven't seen it yet.
Right.
You know, we really haven't. Okay, so we've seen some House races.
And if you want it to happen, in the U.S. Senate, it's got to happen in a rural state without a huge population, where you can hit the voters head on. And you don't need that kind of money. In the state of Florida,
it's just too hard.
Florida is one of the 3 or 4 most expensive states in the country to run a statewide race in. So
in every way,
don't think for a second. You know, Florida, New York, Texas, and California. If you think you're running a statewide race without corporate money and winning at this point,
it hasn't happened yet. I mean, look, I'd love for that to happen. Yes. And I will be behind the very first senator candidate to run on that.
Infrastructure is not there.
And certainly not in Florida.
That's why we want an Askamani to run.
I mean, look, is that the kind of thing that it might at some point happen in a place like Washington? Yeah.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, that could happen somewhere in Washington would be the first place to have a non-corporate senator elected.
Yeah, like something like
Florida
that.
will not be.
A state like New Hampshire. A state like New Hampshire, like Vermont.
Okay, again, well, that's just also small.
But a state like New Hampshire, because of its liberty streak, could actually, in my opinion, elect an independent. Like they would be that kind of state, because again, it's small. It's very.
That's also infinitely more manageable to campaign.
Correct.
You could drive across the whole state in few hours. I mean, how big is New Hampshire? So it's like that's the thing. That's money.
Think about how big our congressional district is, and it's not even that big.
No, and then look at what Alcie's district.
I mean,
Alcie's district's crazy.
Whether it's Sheila, who is all the way down here in Miramar, or Omari, who's all the way up in the West Palm Beach area.
But then it comes around to Miramar. Correct. I mean, it's again, and goes over to like Belglade.
There are so many people that have never woken up to how bad this is until Bernie ran and Trump ran. And now all of a sudden you've got these new people in politics who are like, my God, this stuff is messed up. Yeah, well, prior to you waking up to that fact, people just kind of accepted it as the way it is. Well, we don't accept it as the way it is. So we want to change that. And so with somebody like Lauren Michaels, who could only support the most corporate of corporate candidates, talk about somebody who supported Hillary, who supported Biden, or I don't know if he supported Warren. Well, remember Warren was on the show. I mean, you never know.
And a half.
You know, to me, this is like,
could somebody in a position to maybe make a difference?
Well, that's
have a commentary, have something to say.
You know, well, that again is the problem here. We are kind of stuck, and at the moment, with trying to figure out what is the best path forward. And no one has a perfect blueprint. But what I do advise is, if the resources are not there and the viability is not there, don't waste the time.
I mean, look, this is something we talk about regularly, because we know people that are running for seats that they have absolutely no chance of winning. And on the one hand, you want to be supportive of people who stand for the right things, and you want to support those kinds of candidates. But on the other hand, you want to be realistic and not waste time and resources for something that is a completely futile effort.
This is a great
example. And it's a hard call. And I go back and forth with this in my head on several issues.
You know, Nina Turner is doing a phenomenal job in Ohio, but she built up that name recognition over 5 years, and she's been an elected representative at the state Senate level in that area,
in that district.
And it's not a guarantee that she's going to win. It looks like she will, but nothing is guaranteed. These things take time and they take effort, and this is only to get her into the U.S. House. To even think about her running past that point,
we're not there yet.
Take time.
But no, we know people that run for seats that we know they have no chance of winning. And
correct.
It's sort of like, you know, you wonder, and in some cases, okay, there's a bigger strategy involved. There's this sort of push forward and creating this coalition and pushing the movement in just your campaign and what you're doing. But then on the other hand, how much resources are you allocating towards that when you could be doing something that would be more productive? So I don't know. Like
100%.
I go, it's a hard one.
And again,
it's a hard one. And so look, this is something I feel like we should be clear about. Like when we have people come on this show, it's not necessarily any type of endorsement.
No.
In any way, whether we agree with them on policy 100% or not, or whether or not we think strategically they have a snowball's chance in hell of winning.
But I do think that everybody who is going to run for office with no corporate money,
we will give a platform.
Needs to be given a platform.
Yes.
Because you never know what the long-term possibilities may be for them. If somebody is running for the U.S. Congress in Florida's 20th district and they are taking corporate special interest money, they're not welcome on the show because they are completely juxtaposed to what we're fighting for.
So that's really our criteria.
Even if they say that that's what they're fighting for, the money will not permit them to
that's sort of
it.
our baseline. But so really, when we have somebody on the show, it's not endorsement. This is not about endorsements. This is about providing information to people to make choices.
Correct.
Now, the choices that we are going to platform are going to all be non-corporate choices. You can all take it upon yourselves to dig further deeper into records and voting. And, we'll do our best. Well, it would have been better if he wasn't standing in the State House so he could have talked about his candidacy more. But we will do our best to point out the issues. But I kind of got a lot from the peanut gallery yesterday regarding having Omari on the show. And it was a little bit off-putting for a few reasons. One, he's a sitting representative in my state house. So I'm going to have anybody who's willing to come on in that position is welcome to come on here. And I mean anybody.
Yeah.
And as far as candidates go, we will platform any candidate that does not take corporate or special interest money.
And not only that, but
simple.
Listen, you know what? Lauren Book just took over as the Senate Minority Leader at the State House for Florida's Democrats. And if she ultimately decides that she wants to come on our podcast and talk, we'll have a conversation.
She's a sitting state senator.
Well,
look, anybody who is a sitting official, absolutely we're going to have on our show because that's educational, informative. And as far as candidates, we will platform who we've deemed to be non-corporate.
And Omari coming on the show tonight really taught us a lot about what lengths that you see. You think you know how bad the GOP is just on the surface? Listen, everything is different per state, but I will venture to guess that in terms of the worst of the GOP that exists in the United States, it is probably very hard pressed to find a state that does it worse than this one. This is as bad as it gets. Yeah. You want to say that maybe a state like
Texas
Alabama
is pretty bad too.
Yeah,
Texas is pretty bad.
Texas
has Democratic Congress people that don't support a woman's right to choose.
That's a whole other problem.
You're just talking about the state legislature.
I'm talking about the state legislature.
Well, I mean, they have somebody like Greg Abbott.
Well, yes, but I'm talking about the state legislature where we actually do pass legitimate bills for progressive reform, and the GOP still stands in the way.
No, we pass amendments.
Our amendments.
So we pass things as voters, and then our state house passes bills to override them.
Correct.
That's what's happening.
You got to admit,
it's very clever.
It's a pretty good racket. And I guarantee you that, all of them, I can only imagine when Omari talks about how the lobbyists that are just swimming at the door as soon as you get in.
It's so gross. It's so gross.
And when you think about it, it's very tempting to give in to that stuff. It's very tempting when somebody's going to offer you a job you can't refuse in many ways. I am going to make sure, as your part-time employment here in Tallahassee, that wherever you are, you could be in Gainesville, you could be all the way in Destin, you could be all the way down here in Broward, that I am going to make sure that if you do right by us with these 2 or 3 bills, I'm going to take very good care of it.
Oh, who knows how filthy it is. Oh, and I also wanted to say that next Tuesday,
May the 4th be with you.
May the 4th be with you. And being the first Tuesday of the month, it is Trash and Taco Tuesday.
Trash and Taco Tuesday.
Beach cleanup. I have moved it to 4. So it's going to start at 4 p.m. We meet at the Garfield Park Pavilion, which is basically Connecticut and Garfield Street at the end in Hollywood Beach. There's pavilions there. We meet there. We do about a 90-minute cleanup, and then we do tacos. And this time we're going to do tacos from Taco Spot.
Nice.
Which is the one closer to the Park Pavilion. So we'll
Support
do a round
local
loop.
Small business.
Yeah. So maybe we'll do north side. It's less crowded for cleaning purposes. Maybe, I don't know. We'll come up with a route. But anyway, so next Tuesday is Trash Taco Tuesday. Monday, we'll have Nick Buxton on. Do we have anything set up for next Thursday?
Just my birthday, but we'll see.
Oh yeah, that's right. It's your birthday. You know, you keep mentioning you mention your birthday more than we mention my birthday.
Yeah, who cares about your birthday?
My birthday is a potential fundraiser. My birthday will be our live stream.
You can fundraise for my birthday if you want.
You're not turning 50.
Yeah, I guess.
That warrants people throwing money. So anyway, May 13th, we're going to do our live stream from 9 to 12. It's going to be a ongoing revolving door of different guests and different kinds of things. My son, Reese Perlman, will be submitting a couple of really nice piano performances that I'm going to get to play. We definitely need to figure out how to make volume be heard.
Yes.
Before we do that. But so then next Thursday is your birthday live stream. So we have 2 Thursday night birthday live streams. So then you should figure out who you want as the guest.
Guys, if you are feeling generous,
be a Patreon.
It's very important. As you know, the channel is being horrifically suppressed. We cannot seem to get anybody to tune in, or because obviously it's not being presented to them. You know, I'm wondering if it has anything simply to do with just the name of the show. You know, like I said, generational spelled with a J is not an actual word. It's a made-up word, but one that is a play on words, and you can't even find it in the search engine on YouTube.
I don't think that's why. Because if you would when you use something that isn't a word, but it becomes something when it's known. So
that's fair.
You know, like once you use it, it's a thing.
Well, kind of like Bo of the Fifth Column is just kind of
but that's Bo.
I don't know. Bo's Bo.
So anyway, my birthday will have some fun guests.
Yeah,
including maybe Bo.
I didn't even think about that.
And did you send my video to Andy and Alex that
I never got the video.
It's John. I made a video on StreamYard that I want you guys to send to Andy and Alex from me. It's a video inviting them to my birthday.
Yes.
I like these boys, these Andy and Alex music reviewers.
Good people.
I have no idea, but they're just sweet. Look, I'm old enough to be their mother, but I don't care. They're just cool, and they're reviewing good music, and they have a good taste of music. They love
stranger.
You know what?
Sorry.
Okay, so their review of my all-time favorite song and was very impressive.
Yes.
So
they did a great
yesterday job. I watched Jamel, aka Jamal, who is another person that I watched do a review, and he did over the weekend, he did Abbey Road. He did the whole album.
Wow.
And anybody who knows it's my favorite Beatles album. And so that was really cool to watch that. And it really is meant to be listened to in its entirety for people who don't know that.
Well, you came up with a good idea. Who would I want as a guest?
Yes, it should be somebody that you want. We could dig into your past and find somebody. We could like invite your mom to come on or something.
Yeah, we're not doing that. Thanks, though. Nice thought, Jen. No, I'll have to think about that.
But I'll make it be like this is your life, you know, and have like a voice come on. Do you remember me, Peter? Do you remember me?
Yeah, that's definitely not happening. But I'll think of something.
Yeah, we'll have to have like a little bit of a cocktail party virtual thing going on next week for your birthday. We should have Anthony and Charlia come up for that. Anthony Paz, if you're watching, and I had mentioned too, we want you guys to come up. Next week would be a good one. Come up for the live for Peter's birthday. Well, we'll keep that in mind. But in the meantime, it's always great to see you guys. Thanks for stopping by. Share it everywhere. Become a Patreon if you can. Or patron. Well, you're a patron, but it's Patreon is the name of the brand. Become a Patreon if you can. It would really help the channel. Become a patron on Patreon. Because we're trying to grow GenCore. That's the whole goal here. So we really appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much. And we'll see you soon. Bye, y'all.